This is Bruno from Spainguru. This is the free Spainguru's Spanish Taxes Overview 2025 webinar. A little bit about Spainguru. First of all, our objective is facilitating the relocation process for English-speaking foreigners to Spain since 2014. As you can see, we have good reviews out there. So you're in good hands when we recommend you something or someone or a partner or a service or free resources. And my name is Bruno. I run Spainguru.es. And as I said, you have partners, recommended partners, and you also have free resources. Just so that you know, Spainguru, you can find immigration experts. If you're planning to move to Spain, you can, if you're planning to apply for a non-lucrative visa, digital nomad visa, whatever immigration procedure, I recommend you good immigration experts. Tax advisors, of course, very important that you line up your tax advisory even before taking the decision to come to Spain. And if you plan to come here as a non-EU passport holder, unless you are a UK pensionist, you will need a health insurance, compliant health insurance. So you can find them on Spainguru.es, medical certificates, sworn translations, apostille services, bank accounts, money transfer services, even driving permits, more than 100 complementary or peripheral services if you plan to move to Spain, or even if you're living in Spain. I'm sure you can find a lot of interesting services that were personally vetted by me, and most of them, 90% of them, I have been recommending them for more than 1, 2, 3 years, even more than 5 years. So they're really tested. They've stood the test of time. And there's not only that, but also free resources. There's a weekly newsletter you can join. It is absolutely free. Opt out anytime you want. I send it every Monday with the top discussions, YouTube channel with more than 800 videos, a blog with 1,600 articles plus and increasing. And of course, probably you heard from this webinar on Facebook groups as well, with an aggregated total of 140,000 members. If we aggregate all the groups, with dedicated groups for non-lucrative visa, digital nomad visa, golden visa, Spanish immigration, and so on. Now, enough about Spainguru. Disclaimer here, this presentation is for general information purposes only and does not constitute legal, financial, or tax advice. Consult, please, with a qualified tax advisor or legal professional for personalized guidance. You can find recommended tax advisors on Spainguru.es. Spainguru is not responsible for any errors or outcomes from using this information. And let's talk about the webinar objectives. What I want for you to go away after we finish after this webinar. First of all, gain an overview of the Spanish taxes, understand the key tax categories in Spain, and learn the basic principles of taxation in this country. Second, prepare for informed conversations with tax advisors and engage more effectively with these professionals so you can ask more precise and informed questions when you talk with a professional. Third, clarify the role of professional tax advice. Understand that this webinar provides the general information and is not meant to replace personal tax advice, and recognize that individual circumstances can significantly impact tax liabilities. Sorry for that. And four, identify key considerations for expats. Learn about potential tax implications for US and UK nationals. Mostly, we're focusing mostly in these two passports, let's say, or nationalities, but 99% of what I say here applies for any non-EU passport holder that comes to live to Spain. Be aware of compliance requirements and deadlines to avoid potential penalties. Now, probably the most important concept to start with, Spanish tax residency. How do you establish tax residency in Spain? You have 3 conditions, but the most important one is spending more than 183 days physically in the country within a calendar year, that is from January 1st to December 31st. Physically in Spain, regardless of your status. If you come here as a tourist or later on with a visa, like for example, non-lucrative visa, all days count. Every minute that you spend in Spain counts towards tax residency from the tax authorities' perspective. That is 99% of people will fall into being considered a tax resident in Spain under this condition. Then there are the 2 other conditions, which is if you have your main economic activity or business activity based in Spain, or the main economic interest, personal interest also in Spain, which is, for example, if you have family, spouse, children living in Spain, and even if you spend less than 183 days a year, you could be deemed to be tax resident in Spain, if that is your case. Now, arrival after July 2nd in a certain year will avoid making you a tax resident during that calendar year, because there's only 182 days left during that year before December 31st. This is always in case you haven't been in Spain before July 2nd until January 1st. For that, it's important that you verify your travel records, count prior days spent in Spain, and refer to double taxation treaties for guidance on tiebreaker rules in case of conflicts. So this is also important. Spain is one country, but if you're moving from another country that has a double taxation agreement, it could be in certain situations that you are considered to be a tax resident in both countries. So in case there is a double taxation agreement, there are tiebreaker rules that will establish where you are tax resident in that particular year. So also that you need to have it into account. What are the consequences of being a tax resident in Spain? So if you're a tax resident in Spain, you will be subject to taxation on worldwide income and potentially assets value as well. If you're a non-tax resident, you will be liable for taxes for only the income and assets sourced from or located in Spain. And we will talk especially about the situation of being a digital nomad in Spain, and you move on the second half of the year, and you're still a non-resident, but you will have to pay taxes from income sourced while working physically in the country. General overview of taxation for non-residents. And here you have two groups. If you are EU or EEA associate countries like Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, associate countries for European Union, non-residents, passport holders with income sourced in Spain, there's a general tax rate of 19%. But if you're a non-EU passport holder, which is likely, or passport holder of associated countries, those are the tax rates: 24%, okay, for employment income and rental income. But then for dividends, capital gains, you have a lower effective rate. Now, let's talk about tax systems or regimes and obligations in Spain. You have the general tax regime and a special tax regime. The general tax regime includes the personal income tax, called IRPF in Spanish, Impuestos sobre la Renta de las Personas Físicas. Sounds probably like a tongue twister for a non-Spanish speaker. Wealth tax, you probably heard about this tax, is part of the general tax regime. A solidarity tax, which is a kind of wealth tax but applies on a national level, whereas wealth tax applies on a regional level. And an informative form, number 720, where you declare your overseas assets, values. Now, there is the special tax regime, also called the Beckham Law. Let's talk about the eligibility. It's for specific situations, such as relocation to Spain for work purposes. And generally, you will not be eligible if you are self-employed or freelancer. Usually, this type of workers won't qualify for Beckham Law, unless very rare cases. Now, the advantages for this special tax regime of Beckham Law: a flat 24% tax rate applies to employment income worldwide. Okay, only employment income. If you have income from other sources, it won't apply. Non-Spanish income is exempt from taxation, okay, unless it's employment income. No requirement to submit the 720 form, okay, overseas assets declaration, or pay wealth tax. Now, some cons: tax savings from earnings lower than 55,000 euros are minimal, generally. Of course, you need to check with a tax advisor expert in Beckham Law that understands exactly your situation. Okay, but generally, if you make as an employment income less than 55,000 euros, around that, then Beckham Law maybe is not that good. Additional administrative burden may outweigh the benefits, and for example, there are no family deductions or allowances, and those are the things that will make it not as interesting if you make less than that income. But a special particular situation could apply. Okay, for example, you have mansions, you own mansions in the US, for example, for a value of 100 million euros, but your income is very little. It could be interesting to not having to declare those assets abroad. Okay, just to give you an example of that, you know, the employment income is not the only thing you need to take into account to consider the Beckham Law. Now, let's talk about the obligations. The first tax obligations is to present the overseas assets reporting or 720 form. And this is a declaration of assets and rights held abroad. You will declare different categories. For example, bank accounts, investments, real estate, cryptocurrencies. This is Form 721. It's quite new. The threshold for declaration is starting at 50,000 euros per category. For example, if you have 10 bank accounts with 5,000 euros in each of them, the total category value is 50,000 euros. And you will have to declare those 10 bank accounts, even if they have only 5,000 euros in each, to give you an example. First year requirement, full disclosure of overseas assets, especially regarding the wealth tax, which is, in Spanish, impuesto sobre el patrimonio, and solidarity tax. And potentially the tax authorities, depending on the type of assets that you declare, may think that you are also generating income from those assets as well. Okay, so it has implications for these three taxes. Now, subsequent years, once you have presented the first 720, subsequent years, if the report changes over 20,000 euros or you close assets or there are changes, but if everything remains exactly the same, you don't have to declare it. If there are changes over those thresholds, then you will have to report it again. Deadlines for this submission is March 31st, so we are already close to it, like 1 month left, okay? And you will normally begin the preparation on January 1st, right? So you present the 720 for the assets values at December 31st of the previous tax year. And normally require documents in order to prove the existence of these assets or rights held abroad, bank statements and details over those assets. Now, there is the second tax obligation, income tax filing. As we said, it's called IRPF. Taxable income. You have ordinary income, okay, and then you have investment income with different progressive tax rates. Ordinary income, you have progressive tax rates that range from 19% to 47%. And you have, under this category, salaries, rental income, and business income. Sorry, there you go. I had a snooze alarm here ringing every 5 minutes. And business earnings. Now, investment income. You have dividends, interest, capital gains tax, and they are taxed at lower progressive rates that range from 19% to 30%. The deadline to present the income tax in Spain is June 30th of the following tax year. For example, June 30th, 2025 will present the income of 2024 from January 1st to December 31st, 2024. And you begin the preparation on April 1st, usually, with your tax preparer. Now, U.S. citizens consideration, because in the U.S., if you're a U.S. passport holder, of course, you need to continue to file taxes in the U.S. And normally those taxes have to be filed in April. What will happen is that you will request a U.S. filing extension, then you will submit the Spanish taxes in May or June, and then you will complete the U.S. filing 1040, deducting the taxes that you paid in Spain under the double taxation agreement between Spain and the USA. So you will not pay taxes twice, let's say. You may pay higher taxes, okay, but everything that you pay in Spain, you will be able to credit it towards your payment of your taxes in the US. So normally you will not have to pay taxes in the US once you pay in Spain. And here, this is let's say, a visual slide, so you understand how the tax brackets, the progressive tax brackets, work in Spain. Because, for example, these are round numbers, just so you understand. Imagine that you are making an income 100,000 euros, and you say, like, wait a second, 100,000 euros? That falls into the bracket number 5. Bracket number 5, on the right, you have a table. You see that the tax rate is 45%. I am making 100K. I'm going to have to pay 45% taxes on that income? No. The truth is that the way that the tax brackets work or are calculated, you will pay an effective tax rate close to 36%. Because the way it works is that you pay 19% for the first 12,450 euros of income. For the following amount until 20,200, you pay 24%. For the next amount until 35,200 euros, you will pay 30%. So in reality, you will pay 1 million, or an average, if you will, of those brackets. So if you look at this, these are, of course, I'm not considering allowances or deductions or type of income or anything. This is just so you understand, for illustrative purposes only, how the progressive tax brackets work. And I have calculated orientative taxation for income of 30,000 euros, 40, 50, 60, 70, and 100,000 euros. It goes tax effective rate 24%, 26, 29, 30, 32%, and 36%. Now, let's talk about the third tax obligation, wealth tax and solidarity tax. The wealth tax, impuesto sobre el patrimonio. A lot of people ask, am I going to be taxed on my assets value? A lot of people say, no, you won't get taxed on your assets. You get taxed on the interest, for example, you generate with them, or the income you generate with them. Well, this is not entirely accurate. Actually, if you fall into the, if you're over certain thresholds, you will actually have to pay certain tax over the assets value that you declare in the 720, for example. Let's talk about the wealth tax. It is based on the net wealth as of December 31st. Now, some regions then there are regional thresholds. So this is a regional tax. Depending on the region where you live, where you're a resident, you will have applied different thresholds. For example, Catalonia and Valencia, this tax kicks in at 500,000 euros of net assets value. In other regions, it starts at 700,000 euros, okay? So, for example, if you have €1 million in net asset value and you live in a region like Catalonia, you may pay wealth tax from 1 million minus 500,000 euros. There is also an allowance of a property value of up to 300,000 euros that you can add that to the threshold where the wealth tax starts to be calculated, right? Now, some regions like Madrid and Andalusia have higher exemptions, okay? And effectively, Madrid has raised the threshold to 3 million euros in order to be the same as the solidarity tax, because the solidarity tax is not a regional tax, it's a national tax that kicks in at 3 million euros plus the allowances, okay? But Madrid has chosen to raise it, the wealth tax to 3 million so that the money from this tax goes still to the region, but the threshold is much higher, compared 700,000 to 3 million euros, right? And Andalusia has 100% rebate on the wealth tax. Okay, so basically you will have to file, let's say you file your 720 and everything, and basically you don't pay anything in Andalusia, but of course, as we said, after 3 million plus the allowances, there is the solidarity tax. Now, there is also something called the 60% rule, which is quite complicated, but this is so you understand that you can reduce up to 80% your wealth tax, depending on your taxable income for other taxes. So basically, it limits your tax liability for the wealth tax if the wealth tax is over 60% of your taxable income. So if you have a lot of assets, but your income is small, let's say, your wealth tax will be reduced. Now, the filing deadline for the wealth tax is June 30th, and you normally start preparing it on April 1st. And as we said, solidarity tax is a national tax, which works the same way, more or less the same way as the wealth tax. And as we said, starts at 3 million plus the allowance of usually 700,000 euros. And the deadline is 1 month after, July 31st. So it is important if you are deciding where to move and you are, big assets holder, to decide accordingly where you move, where you establish your tax residency in Spain, because there could be a big difference. Now, this is an example. And again, this is not tax advice. This is a ballpark figure, so you understand how it is calculated. But imagine that you move to Catalonia, where there is a 500,000 euros allowance, and you have a property value at 300,000 euros, and the total value of your assets is 1 million euros. You can see there on the table on the right, you deduct 500,000 euros threshold plus 300,000 euros of your primary residence. Your taxable wealth is 1 million minus 700,000 plus 300,000, 800,000 euros. So you have taxable you have taxable amount of 200,000 euros. Now, if you apply the progressive rates, you will pay less than 500 euros that year, right? Or if you have 1,500,000 euros, you will pay 3,000 euros that year, etc., etc. These are ballpark figures. Now, remember, there is a Q&A session at the end, especially for people who join later. I'm going to do my best to answer your questions. Just make sure to add a question mark at the end of your question so I can easily recognize your questions. And if you think the information I provide here is valuable and helps you in any way, make sure to leave a nice review on Trustpilot. You can click the button there on top, the green bar. There's a red button there that will redirect you to Trustpilot. And it will mean the world to me if you left me a nice review out there, especially after Google deleted my account as a business profile with 77 5-star reviews. I'm starting to build it back on Trustpilot. That seems to be friendlier with online platforms. Thank you so much in advance. Now, let's talk about tax considerations for digital nomads. Okay, I'm going to have a few slides. Three slides about digital nomads. There's two ways you can come to Spain as a digital nomad or teleworker visa, either as an employee, also known in the USA as W-2, or as a self-employed, okay, or freelancer, also called 1099. Now, let's talk about employees, W-2, and this applies for any any passport holder or any nationality or wherever you're applying from. Now, employment relationships as an employee require an employer-employee contract, as we said, W-2 equivalent in the States, social security contributions, or seguridad social in Spanish. The payments are made in Spain, unless the employer lacks a local presence, in which case the employer must register for Spanish social security or instead provide a certificate of coverage, also known as A1. Something important to consider is that at the moment, only the UK, only the United Kingdom A1 is accepted by Spanish authorities and lasts 2 years without further renewals. Okay, and this could be a mistake. It could be only 1 year, okay, because I recently was talking to a tax advisor and mentioned that it was just 1 year. So this, I should maybe correct it, okay? So only if you're applying from the UK and you are able to provide an A1 social security certificate, you could come under the digital nomad framework as an employee. Now, Beckham law benefits are available only to employees, not the self-employed. So it is very, very interesting because you could potentially be eligible for the special tax regime that we mentioned before as an employee if you come to Spain using that social security certificate from the UK. Now, the filing would be June 30th, as we said, for income tax, general tax regime. Income tax or IRPF is the Form 100, and Beckham law, you will need to fill in Form 151. And the preparation starts, as we said, on April 1st. Now, let's talk about contractor, self-employed, okay, or 1099 in the USA. Tax consideration for digital nomads under this type of work relationship. Digital nomads working under commercial agreements in Spain are considered self-employed, and we call them autónomos here, and are required to contribute to Spain's social security system, which provides access to healthcare and pension benefits. It's also something to consider. If you're applying as a digital nomad, as a 1099 or self-employed, you will pay social security in Spain, and you will have access to public healthcare systems, so you don't have to show a private health insurance, okay? Another story is if you consider that you want to have also private health insurance as a complement and everything, but it's not a requirement to have one in order to apply for digital nomad as a self-employed. Contractors are not considered employees, meaning they are responsible for managing their own tax filings and social security payments. I am personally an autónomo, and I have to manage and, of course, and do all my filings as an autónomo. Beckham law does not apply to contractors unless very rare cases. And the deadlines, it depends. If you are filing initially as a non-resident, and potentially you become a tax resident later on, okay, you will have different filings. And this is especially for digital nomad visa, and I think we mentioned it before, that arrive in the second half of the year because they spend less than 183 days in Spain on that calendar year, but they work physically in Spain. That income that they created, even if it's remote for non-Spanish companies, that income is taxable in Spain under the non-resident regime. And then once they become autonomous and start paying social security and are enrolled in the with the tax office here in Spain, they began to be tax residents and start paying the normal tax brackets for income. This is a case study. For example, someone who arrives in September 2024, for example, this is a real case. Someone arrived in Spain in September, okay, after July 2nd. In October 2024, apply for the digital nomad visa. As you probably know, you can apply from Spain. And in November 2024, they got approved. This is a quite quick visa. And in December 2024, registered as autónomo. And here I'm quoting a very specialized tax advisor specialized in digital nomad visa. For tax questions, if you ask 10 different people, you'll get 10 answers. This is a particularly gray area as you weren't resident until you got the TIE card, which is the resident card. So you weren't even officially allowed to work. You are supposed to pay tax in the country where you're physically working, which is maybe what you mean by address. So strictly speaking, any work performed since September from within Spain will have to pay taxes as a non-resident until you become a tax resident. Now, let's talk about additional taxes in Spain. inheritance tax and gift tax, impuestos sobre sucesiones y donaciones, which is paid by the heir or recipient. And you will have tax reductions and exemptions that vary by region and also by the level of connection from the person who is making the gift to you, for example. And then there is the transfer tax, or impuesto de transmisiones patrimoniales, or ITP, which applies to property purchases, second-hand properties, not new properties. New properties pay a reduced VAT of 10% nationally, but if you're buying a second-hand property from another owner, you will pay ITP. That ranges from 6% to actually it's 11%, depending on the region. For example, here in Andalusia, is 7%, okay? And this is a tax also that you need to pay right after you buy the property. And this, you need to budget accordingly. For example, if you buy a property of 300,000 euros, yes, and you're in Andalusia, you will have to pay 7%, which is 21,000 euros, and you have only 60 days from the moment in which you sign the property deeds to pay that. And I mention this because in the USA, it doesn't work this way. In the USA, you buy the property and you don't pay this kind of tax. Once you sell the property, maybe 20 years later, you have to pay this tax. In Spain, you have to pay it at the beginning. They want the money at the beginning, right? And recently, there was an announcement of Pedro Sanchez, the Prime Minister of Spain, saying that non-residents, non-EU passport holders will have to pay 100% of the property value, not even double the tax rates, but 100% of the property value as this tax. We're going to talk about that later. Now, let's talk about property tax, or impuestos sobre bienes inmuebles, or IBI. Once you own the property, every year you will have to pay property tax, which is very, very low compared to other countries. For example, just to give you an example, in a city like Malaga, 100 square meters, you will pay around 350 euros per year. Of course, it depends on the area, okay, in the ayuntamiento or the city hall. Yeah? This is a very localized tax, and it will depend on the type of property, and this based on the cadastral value of the property that can be updated or not. The municipal capital gains tax, or impuesto sobre el incremento del valor de los terrenos de naturaleza urbana, or plusvalía municipal, yes, which is the capital gains tax. Tax on the increase in the property value upon the sale, and calculation methods will depend on the municipality. Again, coming back to the announcements of Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, he said 100% tax on the ITP if you buy property as a non-resident, non-EU passport holder. He announced this. He was giving a speech of 4 hours, and he mentioned this in 1 minute only. Okay. Now, what is the likelihood of this to happen? It's extremely, extremely low, if not impossible. I just interviewed a tax advisor about this, and he mentioned that there is you cannot do this in the European Union. Basically, there is a European law that is on top of the local, let's say, of the national laws that actually prohibits to do something like this. Okay, so the likelihood of this to happen is extremely, extremely low, and it looks to be more like a political announcement just to, so some people, vote him, basically. And unfortunately, this happens quite a lot in Spain and potentially in other countries as well. Politics, the politicians need to show some strength and need to show some, say stuff to make their people happy. Now, let's talk about timing to avoid capital gains tax, or CGT, on property sales. The best way to avoid Spanish CGT is to not become tax resident during the same year where you sell the property. 2 timing strategies. The first one, you put your property on sale for example, in 2024, and you sell it in 2024, and you move to Spain in 2025. For example, you sell it in December 31st, 2024, and you move to Spain in January 2025, 1 day after, you fall into separate tax years. Okay, so that event will not be taxable. Now, if you move the same calendar year where you sold your property, you need to be very careful. For that, as we said, you need to move after July 2nd. So you spend less than 183 days physically in Spain, provided you haven't been in Spain before during the same year. Okay, you should add those countries. For example, if you came at the beginning of the year, scouting trip, 10 days in Spain in January, and then you come on July 2nd, you will have been 192 days in Spain. Okay, and then you would be tax resident from earlier, from January 1st. So if you sold your house in March, for example, you will have to pay capital gains tax in Spain. So be careful and plan accordingly. Now, What are the tax rates for this tax? It's also, again, progressive tax rates using brackets, same way as we did the calculation for income tax. And it is on the, let's say, on the money that you earned, okay, the income that you made, the difference, okay, from the purchase to the sale that you need to calculate it, okay? And of course, there are allowances, or let's say ways to mitigate it. For example, if reinvesting the US home sale proceeds into a new primary residence in Spain, CGT may be deferred or avoided under the Spanish tax law. Or if you reinvest within 2 years of the sale to qualify, or if you're older than 65 years old, there are different ways to mitigate it, or even not pay it, okay? But we would be going too much out of the way. I have content about this type of tax, but the best thing you can do is just not become tax resident that year when you sell the property. Common asked questions: taxation of American 401k and Roth IRAs in Spain. 401k's taxation. The distributions are taxed as general income at progressive rates, okay, just an income tax brackets, traditionally exempt from Modelo 720 or overseas assets informative form. But caution is advised because there has been evolving interpretations of a couple of years already, okay? People have said that they had to declare this into the 720, and we're going to mention a specific ruling, let's say, or consulta vinculante from the tax authorities. Roth IRS taxation. Investment gains tax as income at progressive rates, up to 26%. Must be reported on 720, based on the account surrender value of December 31st. And again, this will be subject to wealth tax, with rates varying by region. And as we said, there is a recent ruling, or consulta vinculante, D 1291-22, that suggests that IRAs and possibly 401ks require reporting in Form 720. So this is something to have in mind. You need to seek professional advice to ensure the compliance and avoid penalties. And of course, reaching out to experts in both Spanish and US filings will be extremely, extremely helpful. And you can find them, of course, on Spainguru.es, recommended ones. I have a lot of content about this. You have here the QR codes, or you can find them on Spainguru.es, just searching by taxes, about, how there is the taxation for pensions, for 401ks, and generally about taxes coming from the UK or from the US. Now, this is let's say a cheat sheet where I try to summarize everything as concisely as possible, so you have everything in one page, which is, of course, very, very difficult because there's so many nuances and etc. But at least for you to have something to easily remember your obligations as Spanish taxes. First, tax residency in Spain, the 183 days in the calendar year. Second, the key tax obligations, Modelo 720 for overseas asset reporting, personal income tax, wealth and solidarity taxes, then the special tax regime, the Beckham law. 4, taxation on pensions, US pensions, UK pensions. And this is very important because if you're a pensionist, double taxation agreements generally address specifically the taxation of the different kinds of pensions. For instance, if you are receiving a government pension or veteran pension from the US or public pensions from the UK, those can only be taxable in the country of origin, namely UK and the US, instead of Spain. But of course, you need to consult with a tax advisor to make sure that the type of pension that you're receiving will be considered that way. And you have certain thresholds in order to declare it, but normally, since your pensions come from abroad, you will have to declare them generally you will have to declare them basically. Then 5, taxation of US investment accounts, 401k, Roth IRAs, Modelo 720. Taxes for digital nomads, okay, employees, contractors, and eligibility with Beckham law. Additional taxes, we spoke about inheritance and gift tax, property tax, EV, CGT, capital gains tax, ETP, transfer tax, and deadlines to remember when to file those taxes so not to incur into potential penalties or fines. And of course, how Spainguru can help. We already spoke about that. So you can find tons of content and community, and also recommended professionals. Now, for the calendar, we said personal income tax. You have there in bold letters: personal income tax, wealth tax, solidarity tax, Form 720. Normally June 30th, July 31st, and the first tax obligation, Form 720, March 31st. As we said, you can find a lot of recommended partners. You're in good hands if you ever need anyone to help you with any of the things related to moving to Spain, or even if you're already living in Spain, you can find interesting additional services as well. And I am at your disposal. Please send me a message if you need anything, any question you may have. I do my best to point you in the right direction. My email is hello@Spainguru.es. Facebook group. You have several Facebook group. If you happen to be applying for the non-lucrative visa or are under one, you have a dedicated group, or digital nomad visa. There's also a dedicated group, etc. YouTube channel with more than 100 videos that you can watch. Every single weekday, I publish one new video, 2-3 minutes, just to keep you updated. And newsletter every single week, where you have a summary of everything happening that week, news, the most watched video, the 10 top discussions among all the groups, etc. And disclaimer, the content of this webinar is for information purposes only, and it's not tax or nor legal advice. Please consult with an experienced tax advisor, and if you need a recommended one, as I said, you can go to Spainguru.es. Now we're going to begin the Q&A session, and if you haven't done so yet, or you're planning to leave because there's no more time for you to be here, please leave me a review on Trustpilot if you think the information I provided is helpful. Now let's go with the questions. Charles, thank you so much for joining today. Does the 183 days to tax residency depend on the location where you declare tax residency for the wealth tax? Wealth tax canceled in Madrid, but not in Barcelona. To be a tax resident of Madrid, you must spend 183 days in Madrid. So, yes, I believe that yes, in order to be considered a specific tax resident of a specific region, you need to also comply with the 183 days rule. Okay, wealth tax canceled in Madrid. It's not canceled actually. Actually, still applying, but they raised the threshold to 3 million just to make it balance with the wealth with the solidarity tax. But if they didn't do this, you were actually paying wealth tax with a higher threshold, but the money goes into the region of Madrid. Okay, in Barcelona you have wealth tax that still applies, and the threshold are lower. Of course, all this is not tax advice. Please consider asking a tax advisor. Caroline, thank you so much for joining today. What type of income is crypto counted as in Spain? Capital gains tax. So this is the form 721, and it is a quite new tax informative form, first of all, where you have to disclose your crypto holdings, okay, under certain conditions, okay, and what type of income is declared, or how they calculate the tax. I don't know exactly how it is, and it is hard to find experts that know this because it is a quite new thing. Richard, thank you for joining today and asking something. Is there any problem filing a tax return in Spain earlier than June 30th to avoid delaying US filing? No, there is no problem as long as it is from April 1st. You cannot file it, for example, now. You have to. The tax authorities have to start the campaign, as they call it, that usually starts in April 1st and goes until June 30th. Caroline, what type of income? Sorry, this one was already asked. Richard, is there software available in Spain to help with filing that is similar to TurboTax in the US? Yes, there is software. I would say that if you are not a self-employed or autonomo, in that case, software is widely used because you need to generate invoices and you need to pay back VAT, etc., etc. And it is more common as a self-employed to use software. There are several out there. Just search for impuestos, or you just Google and a few will come up. But generally, what people use are gestores, okay? You have tax advisors, you have estate or financial planners, and you have gestores, yes? Estate or financial planners, they develop a strategy that is tax compliant and tax friendly for you, okay? And you can find financial planning or estate planners, recommended ones on Spainguru.es as well, experts in the US and UK, that will manage your assets. Then you will have tax advisors who will make sure that you are complying with taxes, okay, and that you declare the taxes correctly, but will generally not do the accountant part. They will redirect you to a third party, which is a gestor or accountant. The gestores will not give you advice on taxes. They will just file the taxes for you, okay, in a compliant way. But we must say that in Spain, they are not responsible for what they file. You are the responsible one. So it's always good to be knowledgeable about what they're filing, in fact. But gestores are cheaper than tax advisors, okay? And this is what people usually use instead of a software, unless you're a self-employed. Paul, thank you for joining today. Can you verify that digital nomad visa does not require private Spanish health insurance? I was advised that it did. So as I said, if you're moving to Spain as a self-employed or 1099, you will have, when you apply for the Spanish digital nomad visa, you will promise you will enroll in Social Security of Spain. If you enroll in Social Security, you will have access to Spanish healthcare. So you will not have to have private health insurance to apply. Now, if you apply as an employee, for example, in the UK, as we said, showing an A1, it is different. Okay, potentially you will need to get private health insurance. This is, as far as I understand, this is how it works. Basically, if you pay Social Security in Spain, you don't need private health insurance. Now, Richard, I have some loss carry forwards that affect my US taxes. Will I be able to use these losses against future capital gains when I file in Spain? I don't know. I'm sorry. That's too technical for me. And Diane, thank you for joining today. If I am a tax resident in Andalusia, what is the exemption threshold to pay the solidarity tax for my assets? So it kicks in at 3 million euros. And then there are allowances. But as we said, there is 100% rebate on the wealth tax in Andalusia, and you shouldn't worry until your net value of your assets on December 31st of a certain year pass the 3 million euros. Well, thank you so much for joining today. There's no more questions, and I really, really appreciate that you made the time to come to this webinar. As I said before, you can reach me out anytime you wish with any question, if you like. There's also a webinar about non-lucrative visa that will happen at the beginning of March if you want to join. And also, if you go to the YouTube channel, I am lately uploading the recordings of previous webinars and many more videos. As I said, thank you so much for joining today. There are no more questions. I really appreciate if you can leave a nice review on Trustpilot. There is a link there up there in the button if you think the information I provided is useful. As I said, I'm not a tax advisor, but there's so many questions, and it's so important to have lined up the tax issues with your immigration issues that in the end I became a de facto knower of these issues, and I think that it provides some value so that you become a little bit more knowledgeable when you engage with a proper tax professional, and your questions are are better, basically. Thank you so much for joining today, Neil, Caroline, Rona, and everyone else who joined today. Thank you. I will send you a recording after this, either today or tomorrow. Take care. Goodbye.